It was my own kitchen. The same kitchen I had prepared birthday cakes in, nursed fevers in, served laughter, tears, and Sunday roast for nearly 3 decades. But that day, it didn't smell like garlic or cinnamon. It smelled like the end. She stood there. Amelia, my best friend, my maid of honor once, my daughter's godmother, wearing one of those smug smiles that tries to pass as pity. And she said it. You are worthless. He chose me over you. She said it like she was offering me tea. No shame, no pause, no regret. Behind her, by the refrigerator, he stood, my husband, or what was left of him, silent, hands folded, eyes cold, not a single word to stop her, not a single flicker of defense, just agreement in stillness. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I just stood there, holding the tea towel I had used to wipe dishes for the two of them, for years. My breath caught in my chest, my legs went numb, my ears rang, not from the words, but from the silence that followed. That silence was louder than betrayal. That silence was a knife dipped in history. I looked at Amelia, and for the first time, I didn't see my friend. I saw the woman who had been walking through my life like a tourist, taking souvenirs, my recipes, my secrets, my husband. And I looked at him, the man who used to kiss my hand when I cried, who once called me his soft place, now standing like a stranger who had stolen the wallpaper from my soul. I turned back to the sink and whispered, not to them, but to myself. That was the moment I realized they didn't just want love. They wanted to bury me inside my own life. They weren't just running away. They were standing in my home, taking it brick by brick, memory by memory. But what they didn't know was this. You can only bury a woman who doesn't know where her power lives. And mine was just waking up. If this story grips you, subscribe for more real-life betrayals, revenge, and justice told from a woman's point of view. After they left that day, Amelia with her victorious smirk and him with that familiar blank face, I didn't move from the sink for hours. The kettle had long gone cold. The sun dipped behind the trees. And still, I stood there, hands in soapy water, replaying it. Not the words, but the timeline. Because betrayal doesn't happen in one moment. It grows, like mold in the dark, quiet, foul, hidden behind things you trust. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. I started rewinding. I remembered the week he forgot our anniversary for the first time in 28 years, said he was swamped, brought home nothing, not even an apology. Then the sudden interest in his appearance, new cologne, gym memberships, quiet protein shakes in the garage. He said it was midlife health. I said, I'm proud of you. He said nothing. It was the silence, now that I think of it, that started speaking louder than words. He used to hum when he worked. Now he scrolled. Used to check in if I was feeling off. Now he was always just heading out for a bit. He stopped asking if I wanted anything when he left the house. Then the petty fights began. You left the porch light on again. You always overcook the rice. You're too sensitive lately. He didn't shout. He jabbed. one tiny slice at a time. He began avoiding eye contact, looking over my shoulder like he was waiting for someone else. And then I remembered it, the first red flag that should have rung the loudest. It was a Tuesday. I had been paying the credit card bill online and noticed something odd. A charge from a resort 2 hours away. 1 room, 2 nights, wine bar, room service. All dated on the weekend. He told me he was at a company retreat. When I asked him about it, he said, "That must be fraud. I'll handle it." He didn't. He just got quieter. I started checking more. Hotel bookings, deleted call logs, a new bank account under his name only. I even noticed how often Amelia had been dropping by. Her visits always lined up with his mood swings. He'd be angry before she came, then soft afterward, almost guilty. Amelia, who used to call me every other day, suddenly couldn't return my texts for a week. When I asked her why, she brushed it off with, "Oh, work's been insane." She was an interior decorator. And it all clicked when I looked at a framed photo from 2 Christmases ago. The one where we all wore matching pajamas. The one where Amelia had her hand on his shoulder. Just a little too long. I hadn't seen it then. I saw love in closeness. Now I saw it differently. Possession. They had been laying the bricks while I handed them the mortar. He was studying my habits, watching for patterns, closing doors behind me while I was still walking down the hall. It wasn't just betrayal. It was strategy. He had been slowly erasing me from my own life, minimizing my voice, doubting my memory, and I had helped him do it because I loved him and I trusted her. He didn't just have an affair, he rehearsed his exit. He was preparing for war, and I didn't even know we were on opposite sides. But the thing about being underestimated is it buys you time, and I was now awake, finally, fully. And I was watching back. I started documenting everything. Every time he lied about where he was, every time she slipped up and mentioned something she shouldn't know, every bank statement, every whispered phone call in the garage at night. I didn't confront. I just recorded. I became a quiet detective in my own home. I stopped asking questions. That startled him more than anything. He began to get jumpy, checking his phone when I walked into a room, locking it, sitting up in bed to answer calls in whispers, stuttering through simple stories. He was unraveling, but I stayed still, because when someone digs a hole for you, let them finish, let them sweat, let them believe they've already won. And then, when they lean back to admire their work, you flip the dirt. But before I did anything public, I wanted to be sure I wasn't the only one who saw it. So I turned to my daughter, my only child, my baby girl who had grown up watching Amelia paint her nails and hearing her father read bedtime stories. She was in her 30s now, with a home and babies of her own, but still, when I said her name, she always picked up. I asked her to come by, alone. She showed up the next day, smiling, holding a bag of pastries from the same bakery her father used to take her to on Saturdays. It nearly broke me. She sat down at the table, chatting like nothing was wrong, and maybe for her, nothing was. I waited until the laughter faded, until the tea had steeped, until there was a pause long enough for truth to walk through. Then I said it. "I think your father is having an affair with Amelia." The words sounded ridiculous coming from my own mouth, like a poorly written soap opera. But my daughter didn't laugh. She froze, blinked, once, twice, and said, "Mom, please tell me you're not serious." I stayed quiet. She sighed,
set her cup down too hard. That's Auntie Amelia. She's been your best friend for years. You're just tired, stressed. Maybe you misunderstood something. I nodded slowly. Maybe. But inside, something cracked. Not in rage, in sorrow. Because in that moment, I saw it, how deep their bond ran, how much she admired them both, how much she wanted to believe in their goodness. She looked at me like I was the one unraveling, the one creating problems. I tried to explain. The credit card charges, the strange looks, the long silences, the way Amelia always showed up when things were tense, and how she suddenly knew things I never told her. My daughter just shook her head gently. Dad's not perfect, but he loves you. And Auntie Amelia, she's always been there for us. You're just reading into things. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I realized this was not the first time she'd chosen to believe him over me. It was just the first time it broke something inside me to admit it. Flashbacks flooded my mind. That summer she wanted to go on a trip and he said no, I was the one she blamed. That time he forgot her graduation dinner, I was the one who should have reminded him. That Christmas when he gave her cash and I gave her a handmade quilt, he was the generous one. I was trying too hard. And through it all, I had smiled, defended him, smoothed the cracks with my own hands. I had trained her, unintentionally, to see me as the soft wall, the one who could bend. So of course, when the foundation shook, she held on to him. I didn't cry in front of her. I simply said, "Thank you for coming, sweetheart." She stood, kissed my forehead, told me to rest. Then she added, "Don't push people away, Mom. You need us right now." She meant well. But I wasn't pushing people away. They were walking away on their own. I was just finally letting the door close behind them. After she left, I sat at that same table, staring at the chair she'd just been in. And for the first time, I let myself admit the loneliest part of betrayal. Not the affair, not the lies, not even the loss of love. It's being disbelieved by the one you carried in your own body. It's watching the child you protected with everything side with the people you should have been protected from. That night, I didn't sleep. I pulled out every notebook, every document, every receipt I had been gathering, and I started building something not even my daughter could deny. Because if they were going to rewrite my life, make me out to be bitter, broken, forgotten, then I was going to make sure they couldn't skip the footnotes. They could bury me, but I would leave behind a map. And soon, my daughter would follow it, whether she was ready or not.
Because the truth has a pulse. And when you stop smothering it with excuses, it begins to breathe on its own, quietly, deeply, until it grows loud enough to shake the walls. And the first wall it shook was the house. Our house, the one we built from nothing, bricks paid for with grocery savings, tiles I chose while pregnant, curtains I hand-stitched. That house was not just a structure, it was our history. Or so I thought. It started when he suggested we review some paperwork. He came into the living room holding a folder and said he wanted to make sure we were on the same page about our assets, just in case anything ever happened. He said it with that false kindness, like a nurse preparing to tell you bad news gently. I smiled and played along. He flipped pages and pointed at documents I barely recognized, and that's when I noticed it. The line on the title deed. The house was no longer listed jointly. It was under a trust I hadn't signed for, a trust that had a new clause. Transferable rights upon change of marital status. He kept talking, trying to distract me with other numbers, but I stopped listening.
I was already out of the conversation and deep into the realization he had moved the battlefield into the foundation of my home. I nodded calmly and told him I needed time to process everything. He smiled, relieved. He thought he'd won. But that night, after he fell asleep on the couch with his phone pressed to his chest like a guard dog, I took action. I called a lawyer the next morning, a woman, and I told her everything. She listened, every word. Then she asked for documents. I sent them all. The next day, she called me back with her voice unusually tight. "There's a loophole," she said. "He's using a marital trust he created through a refinance that likely occurred 5 years ago when your daughter helped fund the kitchen remodel." I blinked. She gifted us that money. She thought she did, but she sent it directly to him. In legal terms, that makes her the grantor. I was quiet. Then she added, "And if we can prove that a portion of the remodel was funded by your daughter under false pretense, and that you weren't informed about the terms of the trust, we have grounds to challenge it." I sat with that for a moment, because the very thing he had used against me, the generosity of our daughter, might become the thread that unraveled his plan. Still, it wasn't over. The lawyer gave me the warning. If he suspects we're coming for the trust, he'll accelerate. Men like this always do. So you need to act fast and stay silent. So I did. I kept cooking dinner, folding his laundry, laughing at his jokes. I kept pretending I hadn't already seen the battlefield blueprint. And I waited. Until the day I heard him on the phone with someone. Amelia, I assume. He said, "Once the paperwork's done, we'll have the house. She won't fight. She's too tired." That was the moment I realized this was never about love. This was about legacy. He didn't just want to leave. He wanted to walk away wearing the crown he stole from my life. He wanted the house, the reputation, the new love story of a man who found freedom after years of surviving a difficult woman. But difficult? No, I was not difficult. I was just no longer asleep. That week, I filed an injunction with my lawyer, blocking any further changes to the property until the financial origin of the remodel was reviewed. I sent my daughter a message. "Sweetheart, I need you to double-check the receipts from the year you paid for the remodel. Do you remember if you transferred the money to my account or your father's?" She called immediately. "Why? What's going on?" I told her everything, not in anger, in plain, measured truth. She didn't speak for a while. Then she said, "I sent it to Dad because you were at the hospital with Grandma. He said he'd handle it." Her voice cracked. And just like that, the map I had drawn lit up. The trail I had left wasn't for revenge. It was for her, and she had found it. But what she did next told me everything I needed to know about how betrayal echoes differently through generations. She said, "Let me talk to Dad first." Even now, with evidence in her palm, her instinct was to protect him, to see both sides. I didn't blame her. I raised her to see good in people. I just never imagined it would cost her the ability to see through them. She called me 2 days later. Her voice was different, thinner, almost like she was embarrassed to be speaking. "I talked to Dad," she said. "He said you're making this more complicated than it needs to be. That you're angry because he's moved on and you're using legal stuff to punish him." I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Then she said something that made my heart sit down in my chest. She said, "I just want peace, Mom. Please don't make this uglier than it already is." That was the moment I realized she wasn't on either side. She just didn't want to pick a side where love didn't look neat anymore. where the people who raised her were flawed and selfish and cruel in quiet ways. I told her gently, "I'm not trying to hurt your father. I'm trying to stop him from erasing me." She went quiet. And from that moment on, I knew I was walking this next stretch alone. But I still had one hope left. Family. My in-laws had once adored me. His mother used to call me her daughter, bragging about my cooking, my patience, my grace. I reached out to her, hoping that maybe, just maybe, a mother could understand what it felt like to be betrayed by someone you gave your life to. She picked up the phone, warm as always, until I told her why I was calling. "Sweetheart," she sighed, "I know you're hurting, but he's a man. He has needs. You two stopped laughing years ago. You can't expect him to live in silence forever." I didn't respond. She continued, "And Amelia is not a stranger. You know her. That's better than him running off with some bar girl. At least this way, the kids still have family unity." Unity? Unity with the woman who stood in my kitchen and called me worthless? I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. I called my brother next, a man I helped raise after our father passed, the one who once said, "If anyone ever hurts you, I'll bury them in court documents." He listened, sighed, then said, "Honestly, sis, maybe just let it go. You're not going to win against someone like him. Just protect your peace. Just protect your peace." As if peace was something you could wrap in foil and store in the fridge while your whole life burns outside the kitchen window. That night, I sat alone in bed and whispered what I had never said aloud until that point. Some people only love you when you're useful, and the moment you need them back, they go quiet. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised, because I finally saw it clearly. The love I had been given by some people wasn't love. It was convenience. It was comfort. It was access to something they needed from me. But real love, real loyalty, it shows up when you're no longer useful. And I was done begging for what should have been mine without asking. So I stopped calling, stopped explaining, stopped hoping they'd come around. I put on my quiet armor, and I prepared for war.
But not the kind they expected. Not screaming, not begging, not slashing tires or showing up uninvited. That would have made their version of me easier to sell. The bitter old wife, the emotional wreck, the jealous friend. No, I became everything they didn't prepare for. Still, watchful, calculated. I knew if I wanted to win, I had to do it without ever raising my voice. I had to move like him, precise and silent. But unlike him, I had truth on my side. And truth? Truth doesn't need to shout. It just waits. He didn't leave the house. No, that would have been too obvious, too brave. He stayed, slept on the couch, ate the food I cooked, kept pretending we were working through things. But he was waiting, watching for me to break. He thought I'd crumble under the silence, that I'd ask him to explain himself, that I'd hand him back control just to keep the peace. Instead, I got quieter. That scared him more than anything. He started calling Amelia late at night, locked in the bathroom. I could hear the soft rumble of his voice through the walls, pacing, talking fast, nervous. One night, I heard him say, "She's playing dumb, but something's off. She's up to something." I smiled into the darkness. Let him worry. Let him pace. Let him feel what I had felt for months. The silence between us grew louder each day. He stopped trying to make small talk, stopped leaving his mug in the sink like he used to. Everything became tight, contained, deliberate, like he was living with a stranger who knew where the knives were. Then, one afternoon, I found my daughter sitting outside on the porch. Her eyes were swollen, and she was holding a stack of papers. She looked up at me and whispered, "I believe you now." She had confronted her father, asked him straight out, and he hadn't denied it. He just said, "Things happen. We're not kids anymore." Things happen. That was my 30-year marriage and lifelong friendship meant to him. A shrug, a stain he didn't bother to wipe up. My daughter had gone home crying, only to find messages from Amelia on her phone, long-winded justifications, half-hearted apologies, as if she expected to be forgiven because she once bought my daughter a birthday cake. She said she didn't mean to fall in love, like love is something that just trips and lands in betrayal. I held her hand. She asked, "What do we do now?" I said, "We wait." Because by then, the lawyer had filed the injunction on the house. The paperwork was locked. His little trust game was frozen. He didn't know it yet, but his winning hand had expired. Still, he tried one last move. He came to me one evening, holding a check. $20,000. "Let's make this simple," he said. "You take this, leave quietly, and we can both move on. No lawyers." I looked at the check like it was a used napkin. "You think this is about money?" I asked. He shrugged again. That same lazy indifference that once fooled me into thinking it was calm. "No one wants to see this get ugly," he said. And that was the moment I understood something deeper. He wasn't afraid of losing the house. He was afraid of me telling the truth. He had spent so long crafting a version of himself, the solid man, the devoted husband, the wise friend. A check, a smile, a quick divorce, that would have kept his image intact. But silence from me? That terrified him, because silence is unpredictable. He started going out more after that, sometimes not returning till morning. I let him. He was losing control. I was taking notes. Let him wonder who I was meeting with. Let him sweat. My daughter offered to mediate, to keep things civil. I said, civility is what got me betrayed in the first place. I'll settle for strategy now. And then the final thread snapped. I found a lease agreement. Amelia had helped him secure a rental property not far from the house. He was preparing to move in with her, start fresh. I didn't react. I just waited until the contract finalized. Then I made my own move. Because when the enemy finally shows you their hiding place, that's when you strike. He thought he was moving into his fresh start, thought he'd wear the shame like a badge. It didn't work out with my wife. Thought people would nod with sympathy and Amelia would beam at his side like she'd won something shiny and new. But I wasn't playing checkers. I was playing chess. And my next move? It was already done before he even picked up his last box. I quietly met with a local property manager 2 weeks before the lease was finalized. We walked through the rental unit while it was still in transition. The landlord was behind on paperwork. There was an opening, and I took it. You see, what he didn't know was that the property owner was the cousin of my former student's husband. Small town, long memory. I didn't out him. I didn't scream. I simply asked,
Would you be willing to lease the unit next door to a quiet tenant, someone who'll never be late on rent, won't make noise, and just needs a fresh start? The answer was yes. I signed that lease with steady hands, because I wasn't going to spy. I wasn't going to sabotage. I was just going to be nearby. The mistress may have gotten the man, but I was going to be the shadow of his unfinished business. Let him see me every time he walked to his car. Let him wonder why I looked so calm. Let Amelia peek through their window and ask him why I never seemed broken. Let silence stalk them. But that wasn't all. I had one more thing to do. I requested a meeting with Amelia. Not a confrontation, a conversation. We met in a quiet cafe downtown. She wore sunglasses and too much perfume. Her smile was thin. I sat down, folded my hands, and simply said, "Does he help you with your taxes? Did he tell you about the 3-year loan under his name that defaulted? About the back child support he's still technically on the hook for from before we met? Or how he hasn't filed a clean return in 6 years?" She blinked, hard. Then I leaned in and whispered, "Are you ready to be the one washing his mother's socks when she gets sick? To listen to him snore with that rattle in his chest that gets worse every winter? Ready to remind him to take his blood pressure pills when he forgets and blames you?" Her lips parted, but no words came. I smiled softly, kindly, not with cruelty, just clarity. Love is not the thing that will save you from what he is. It's the thing that will cost you what you are. Be sure, Amelia. I stood up. She didn't follow. I walked out and didn't look back. But I knew she would never enjoy him again, not without tasting the rot I left behind. And him? Oh, he noticed the silence, the not knowing what I was doing, the calm. He started calling more, messages that said, "Can we talk? You didn't have to go this far. We can still figure this out like adults." But I wasn't interested in being an adult under his terms. I was interested in being free. And my freedom was not loud. It didn't come with court orders or burned clothes. It came with control, with strategy, with the beautiful silence that follows after the door has closed and you've double-locked it behind you. I didn't gloat. I didn't parade. I just moved differently. I rented out the top floor of our original house to a traveling nurse and her daughter, changed the locks, removed his name from the mailbox, filed a motion to split assets based on traceable contribution, not marriage duration, sent it to his attorney, who had once assumed I'd cave by now. Then I blocked his number. The last thing he ever saw from me was a brief message. "The woman you left, she's gone. I'm what's left, and what's left is not yours." I didn't wait for his reply. I didn't care. Because power, real power, isn't about making someone else suffer. It's about making sure they never get to define your story again.
But as life would have it, closure always tests you before it settles in. One day, not long after I had mailed the final documents and blocked his number, I came home to find him standing outside my gate. He looked older, not in the way time does it, but in the way truth does. His shirt was wrinkled, his shoulders slouched, and for the first time, he looked unsure. He didn't speak right away, just stood there, hands in his pockets like a teenage boy who'd been caught shoplifting. I didn't open the gate. He said, "Can we talk?" I folded my arms. "About what?" He hesitated, then mumbled, "Everything." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so small. Everything? He wanted to summarize 30 years, 2 betrayals, a friendship burned, and a home almost stolen into everything. I stepped forward just enough for him to hear my voice clearly, but not enough to give him hope. "You're not here because you regret what you did," I said. "You're here because I didn't fall apart like you planned." He opened his mouth, but I kept going. "You thought I'd yell, beg, tear the curtains, and fall into myself. You thought you'd get to walk away clean while I played the hysterical woman." I took a deep breath, leveled my voice, but I didn't scream. I didn't fight you for attention. I fought you in silence, with paper, with law, with facts, with strategy. And now that everything is documented, sealed, and filed, I paused. "You have nothing left to control." He looked at the ground. Then came the inevitable. "I never meant to hurt you." The most cowardly sentence in the English language. I almost walked away, but I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. I handed it through the gate slots. Inside was everything. Bank records, screenshots, affidavits, the trust loophole, timeline, her text messages, his, everything he thought he had done in the dark, now printed in plain ink. He flipped through the first few pages, his hands beginning to tremble. Then I said what I came to say. "You didn't break me. You exposed me to the truth of who you really were. And now I know I survived a man who would have let me drown just to keep his story pretty." His eyes filled with something. Regret, shame, panic. It didn't matter, because I had none left to give. He stuttered, "So this is it?" I smiled, a soft, almost gentle smile. "Yes, this is it." He looked like he wanted to say more, like he wanted to unwrite every step. But that's the thing about betrayal. You can't unstab someone just because they didn't bleed the way you expected. I turned and walked away, and this time, I didn't look back. Because I didn't need to. He was the past, and I was done dragging corpses through my future. The divorce was finalized exactly 93 days later. It wasn't loud. There was no courtroom drama, no yelling lawyers, no sudden outbursts. Just ink and signatures, and the sound of a clock ticking in a beige room where the last thread of 30 years came undone. He walked in wearing the same gray suit he wore to our daughter's graduation. I wore navy blue. Clean, simple, soft shoulder pads. I didn't wear perfume. I didn't need armor. My calm was my presence. He didn't look at me during the hearing. I didn't offer him the grace of looking back. The judge read the terms. I got the house, the savings from the early years, the car in my name, and the right to rent the upper floor without his interference. The forensic audit had made it clear who had contributed and who had extracted. He was left with his name, whatever was in his private account, and Amelia. I signed first. When I stood to leave, I heard the clerk whisper to her colleague, "She doesn't even flinch." She was right. Because there's a special kind of peace that comes when you're finally out of the cage someone built with your trust. I walked out of that courtroom, not as a broken woman, but as a woman reborn in silence. I didn't throw a party. I didn't announce anything on social media. I just changed the locks and bought myself flowers. Tulips. Deep purple. The color of dignity. I took a part-time job at the local library, just 3 days a week. The pay wasn't much, but the quiet, the smell of books, the children who smiled as I stamped their return slips. It reminded me that life didn't end with a husband or a best friend. It breathed again. I started journaling in the mornings, took long walks at sunrise, read poetry aloud to myself, ate breakfast in bed on Sundays, alone, but not lonely. And one afternoon, as I sat in the park feeding birds with a warm coffee in my hand, I realized something beautiful. This wasn't revenge. This was resurrection. He tried to write me off like a subplot, but I had turned the page, and I had found myself waiting on the next chapter, whole, quiet, and no longer hungry for explanations. One day, that chapter brought a knock on my door. It was my daughter. No warning, no call. She just stood there, holding a grocery bag in one hand and a soft, nervous smile in the other. "Thought I'd cook for you today," she said. I stepped aside and let her in. She moved through my kitchen like she remembered it, where I kept the spices, the cabinet with the chipped bowls, the drawer that always stuck. She didn't ask questions. She just cooked, and I just watched her. It was the first time in months we were in the same room without tears waiting under the surface. We ate in the living room, quiet at first, then soft laughter, then silence again. Halfway through her second bite, she put her fork down. "She owe you an apology," she whispered. I looked at her, let her speak. "I didn't believe you," she said, eyes wet. "I defended him, her. I thought you were angry or exaggerating. I didn't realize what they were really doing to you, to all of us." I reached across the table and took her hand. I said gently, "You believed what you were raised to believe, that he was stable, that I was soft, that we were fine." She nodded. "After the divorce, he moved in with her. I went to visit, just once." She looked down. "He's not happy, Mom. He's bitter. He complains all the time, about money, about her, about everything. He said you turned cold." I smiled. "He never knew how warm I really was. He only knew what I gave him. He never learned to find it on his own." We sat quietly for a moment. Then she asked the question I knew had been living in her throat since the day she saw the truth. "What do I do if this ever happens to me?" I leaned back, breathed deep, and let my voice wrap around her like armor. "If it ever happens to you, don't scream, don't chase, don't beg, don't shrink." I leaned forward. "Think. Protect your name, protect your proof, and when the time is right, strike once, clean, and never look back." She didn't cry. She nodded. And in that moment, I saw not just my daughter, but a woman who would never again be unarmed in the face of betrayal. Later, as she left, we hugged at the door, longer than usual. She looked at me and said, "I'm proud of you, Mom." I watched her walk to her car, wind lifting her curls, the setting sun turning her into a silhouette of everything I had fought to preserve. And just before she opened the door, she turned back. "Oh, by the way, Amelia left him." I raised an eyebrow. She said she couldn't handle the weight of his regrets. We both laughed, not cruelly, just knowingly. Because some things don't need revenge, they just need time, and the truth will do the rest. If this story hit you in the chest the way it did me, share it. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done? And don't forget to subscribe for more true stories of women who fought back, quietly, wisely, and without apology. You are not alone. You are not weak. And you are never without a way forward.